This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Long education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
And welcome to it. Monday here at the Steve Gruber Show. Getting through the first weekend that truly felt like fall. Even though it's October, it's hard for me to believe that summer is gone. And I love the fall in Michigan. I do. But it does seem, I don't know, disappointing, I guess, that that's it. That it's gone. For those of us living in the southern United States, especially in the Carolinas, South Carolina, especially hard hit, it's monsoon season. We got some rain in Michigan over the weekend, but nothing like the floods they're seeing in South Carolina. Joaquin pounding. It just got into a repeat pattern where it couldn't break free. The water wasn't distributed evenly. It was distributed into one place. Columbia, South Carolina, hit with days of torrential rains, keeping much of South Carolina's capital gripped with flood waters. It's just an absolute mess. At least 7 weather-related deaths now attributed to that. We'll keep an eye on that, but Joaquin should finally be letting its grip up here shortly. It seems that they say it's the heaviest rain in maybe 1,000 years in that part of the country. 1,000 years. I mean, massive flooding, as you can imagine, floods everywhere, and a complete mess. So firefighters and teams from electrical companies and first responders all working together to get people out and get them rescued and so forth as roads are washed away. The door-to-door searches will begin today for those that survived. Door-to-door searches will begin later today. Pretty intense to say the least. Pretty intense to say the least. Let's see, what do we have on the program today? Allan Saxe, professor of political science, will be here. Liz Peek, one of our favorites, will be here to discuss China's flimsy climate deal. You know, and I'm sure they'll say, look, it flooded in South Carolina. It must be climate change. Well, that, or it could be that these things happen from time to time. You know, they found a woolly mammoth buried outside of Chelsea in a farmer's field here a few days ago. It was probably, I don't know, 12 or 15 feet beneath the surface. They found the skeleton, the skull, the tusks, the whole thing. Died out maybe 11,700 years ago, 12,000 years ago, somewhere in that time frame. Probably killed by global warming because global warming has existed for the last 12 or 15,000 years. The glaciers have receded. There's no Republicans to blame then, that's all. It's the Steve Gruber Show on a Monday. Welcome to it. 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. Hillary Clinton trying to jumpstart her floundering, flatlining campaign. Says that she'll push new gun control measures using executive action to begin with. Clinton will propose new gun control measures, including a promise to employ executive action to expand background checks for firearms sellers at gun shows and online. Her plans will be unveiled today during a campaign swing through New Hampshire. Her campaign says her proposals include a repeal of legislation shielding gun manufacturers, distributors, and dealers from most liability suits, even in the case of mass shootings, like the ones that killed 9 students at a community college on Thursday in Oregon. If you pull away the protection from the manufacturer, there will be no gun companies in America. She knows that. The proposals mark an attempt by Clinton to make up ground among the liberal wing of the Democratic Party against her closest rival, Bernie Sanders, the Marxist of Vermont. Sanders has wooed the Democratic base with his liberal positions on issues like income inequality, college debt. He struggled to defend a more mixed record on gun legislation, a reflection, he says, of his rural gun-friendly home state. So here's my question. What gun law would it have been? It would have prevented what happened in Oregon or Charleston or Newtown, for that matter. Apparently, in the Umpqua shooting in Oregon, the guy lived with his mom. Mom had guns. Sound familiar? Just like Newtown. You got a crazy kid, and they say, except in Newtown, at least she was trying to get the kid to a mental hospital. Never got there. Not sure about this woman in Oregon. Meanwhile, Barack Obama is hinting directly at gun confiscation. Let me point to what he said, and he's looking directly at confiscation. We know that other countries, in response to one mass shooting, have been able to craft laws that almost eliminate mass shootings. Friends of ours, allies of ours, Great Britain, Australia, countries like ours. So we know there are ways to prevent it. Yeah, Great Britain and Australia outlawed guns altogether and confiscated guns from their citizens because they were not constitutionally protected in those countries. And Obama is not the only one who suggested taking a gun-free approach to American life, period. The anti-Second Amendment message is being published and pushed by Slate and Vox and Dan Savage. On October the 1st, Slate ran a story reminding readers that Australia enacted their gun ban in response to an attack April 28, 1996, when a gunman opened fire on tourists in a seaside resort in Port Arthur, Tasmania. 35 killed, 23 wounded. 12 days later, Australia's government, for all intents and purposes, banned firearms altogether. Vox explained that Australia confiscated guns through a mandatory gun buyback program, which forced gun owners to hand their firearms over for destruction. Vox claims the result was that murders and suicides plummeted and suggested such a path might be an option for America. Of course, Vox, like all these left-wing publications, failed to mention that firearm-related murder and non-negligent homicide has been plummeting in America since the mid-1990s. They're coming. They are coming for your firearms. And how does the world become a safer place if you don't have a gun? How does America become a safer place if I am disarmed? And the answer is it doesn't become a safer place if I am disarmed. Or you, for that matter. We'll have some comments from Donald Trump about the gun control debate and how he's responding on Meet the Press with Chucky Todd. Plus, we'll have more of that woolly mammoth found in Chelsea, Washtenaw County. I think it's a fascinating story. It's 14 after. It's Monday. Welcome to the Steve Gruber Show.
Genuine Michigan common sense on display every day.
Is a warm gun.
All right, it's 18 after the hour.
Is a warm gun, mama.
Yeah, here's a
When I hold you in my arms.
here's some stats. I've just got some stats. So this class is in session. So make sure you take notes. There'll be a quiz later. In fact, there's a quiz every day in this country. If you don't know the facts, you'll get run over by people that are ruled by emotion. So you need to know the facts of the people that are going, well, I feel. Well, it doesn't matter. I feel safer if there's no guns. Well, you can feel safer, but you're wrong. Unintentional deaths, accidental deaths in America, 131,000. Accidental falls, 31,000. Poisoning, 38,000. Motor vehicle accidents, somewhere between 35 and 40,000, depending on whose statistics you go with. In 2014, Chicago, Barack Obama's hometown, witnessed the lowest homicide rate the city has seen in 56 years. It's no coincidence that the data was revealed after Chicago was dragged kicking and screaming into the age of enlightenment. and forced to loosen their draconian, unconstitutional anti-Second Amendment laws. On October 1st, 2015, Obama took to the podium to wag his finger and talk of my hometown. This is written by somebody from Roseburg, Oregon. So as I watched his comments, my jaw pulsated and clenched teeth as my fist balled with rage. The shooting at Umpqua, and by the way, it's Umpqua. You would think that the folks in the national news media could figure out how to pronounce the name of this place. It's not Umpqua or Umpqua. It's Umpqua Community College. Jeez. Anyhow, it's a school he attended. Hit close to home and witnessing our nation's first dictator lecture Americans on the supposed need for gun control sickened me. Obama said a great many things, and nearly every single sentence oozed with self-righteousness as he advocated for our nation the kind of common-sense gun laws that have for decades kept his hometown a war zone of gun-related deaths. Somehow this has become routine, said Obama. The reporting has become routine. My response here from the podium has become routine. He's correct. It has become routine. However, no matter how many times he blames the NRA, no matter how many times he calls for common-sense gun laws, one inescapable fact remains. The stats consistently show that, yes, more guns equal less crime. In his lecture, Obama huffed and puffed and mocked those who cling to the Constitution and cling to the consistent facts that more guns in the hands of responsible gun owners lead to a lower crime rate. Who believes that, he asked. I hope and pray and I don't have to come out again during my tenure as president to offer my condolences to families, but based on my experience as president, I can't guarantee that, and that's terrible to say. Who believes that? Well, for starters, millions of Americans who have the very basic ability to observe. Let's start with empirical evidence. Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C., Newark, South Central. What do they all have in common? Two things: sky-high crime rates and very strict gun control laws. At any rate, I want to go to Donald Trump now, who was on the morning shows with Chuck Todd over the weekend. He was on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd, who should be arrested for impersonating a newsman. But Chuck Todd was there, and here's Donald Trump on gun control.
So the way I look at it, you take Chicago, you take Baltimore, you take various other places where you have tremendous gun violence and death, right? The strictest laws in the United States, in the world, for guns, happens to be Chicago, where they have a lot of problems. Baltimore. A lot of the places where you have the biggest problem is where they have the strongest laws.
But local laws without a national floor are pointless.
But the problem you have is the strongest, the most stringent laws are, in almost every case, the worst places. It doesn't seem to work. It's a tough situation, Chuck. It's a tough situation. And when it comes to the schools, it really is mental health. It's a mental problem.
You don't believe we have too many guns? Do you think there's too many guns in America?
Well, you could make the case that the school that we just, went through, and I see it was a gun-free zone, and you were not allowed to have guns at all in that particular area. And you can make the case that it would have been a lot better had people had guns because they had something to fire back.
Yeah, you could make that case for sure. It's comments like that that are going to keep Trump buoyed. It's comments like that that are going to keep him, doing well in the polls, in my estimation. And he keeps getting the camera in front. So here's what it comes down to then. Hillary Clinton, who's out there saying that she will use executive action to enforce and change gun control laws. She will use executive action, go around Congress, go around the will of the people, and enact gun control if elected president, which I believe, by the way. I think is the first honest comment by a Democrat regarding gun control in quite some time. I think that Barack Obama may, in fact, attempt to use executive action to, enforce gun control. Now, as it is, here's the question for you. And don't be afraid to call 888-900-9966. One thing continues to be put out there, and that is a background check for anyone purchasing a firearm anywhere, whether it's purchasing it from your neighbor, online, inheriting it from an estate. Should background checks be conducted on anyone obtaining a firearm? The NRA is consistently opposed to this point of view. But do you want your neighbor who is a little bit unstable to just be able to get on, the newspaper and go pick up a gun from somebody, in the town nearby or in that town and not have a background check? Do you think it's appropriate for people to be able to inherit guns if they're not quite stable without a background check? I'm perfectly okay with background checks is my point. I am not okay with registration. I am not okay with trying to ban certain types of firearms. But background checks, probably not a bad idea. 25 after on the Steve Gruber Show.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
It's the Steve Gruber Show on a Monday. Time to roll up your sleeves and get back to work. So what about background checks? I was just having this conversation with Alex during the break. And, the fact of the matter is, if you go buy a gun from your neighbor, go buy a shotgun, whatever. Neighbor's got a shotgun he wants to sell. You look at it. You want it. You buy it. No background check required. If somebody in your family dies and leaves guns behind to the kids, no background check required. Now, by law, you should take handguns. By law, you're supposed to go, check them in or get them registered. But, how many do and how many don't, right? But long guns, you're not required to do anything with. So my point being is simply this. If your neighbor is a good guy, but you're a nutball, you're a nutcase, and you go down the street and, pick up the gun from your neighbor and you're a nutcase, well, that's probably not the best. That's probably not the best approach. If Uncle Johnny dies and he leaves his guns to his 3 kids, and Billy, his nutball, his one kid's a screwball and comes into a bunch of guns, well, again, don't you think there should be a background check there? I'm not going to win a lot of praise today, but I'm going to tell you I'm okay as a gun owner. Listen, don't kid yourself like they don't know that you have guns and ammunition anyway. I mean, if you're on the internet looking at guns and ammunition or anything else, they know you're a gun owner. You have an interest. There's a red flag. And the NSA and everybody else is looking at you anyway. To the hotline, Joe is on the line in Grand Rapids today. Joe, welcome to the program.
I just don't think the background checks between private parties, like an uncle and a nephew or a dad and a son or something, I don't think there's any way they can enforce that. Every firearm I've ever bought from a retailer, even at gun shows, I've had to fill out paperwork for it. And
that's right.
There are people that you can't look at somebody unless they show up wearing, a Spider-Man outfit or something. You can't look at somebody and say, hey, there's something wrong with them.
Why do you got to take shots at Spider-Man?
Well, you know what I'm saying. Unless there's something obvious where somebody's,
right,
spouting their mouth off or they're dressed like Hitler or something. You can't. I mean, it's almost impossible. And if guns were the problem,
let me ask you this then. Hold on though. Let me ask you this. How difficult is it really, Joe? And it's a fair question. And I'm a gun owner, as you well know from listening to this program. And my wife, a legal gun owner as well. How difficult is it really? I mean, to say, listen, if you're going to buy a gun from somebody out of the newspaper, out of the classifieds that you don't know, but you're required to go get a yellow sheet. In order to buy that gun, you got to fill out the yellow sheet. I mean, it could be a smartphone app, pretty simple. Well, then they're going to know where the guns are. Listen, guys, they know where the guns are anyway. Let's not kid ourselves. And then what about, somebody inheriting guns? Can they enforce it? No, probably not. When guns pass, generationally, can they be enforced? Probably not. You have a fair point, but you can make it enforceable. You could say having an unregistered gun or a gun that, you didn't buy using your background check is a better way to put it. I didn't mean a registered gun because I'm not into blanket registration across the country, but I am, background checks seem to make sense and have prevented people from getting guns they shouldn't. And, being able to fill out a yellow sheet because you buy one from your neighbor, big deal. So you fill out the yellow sheet and you drop it off. You could probably find a way to do it online so that people could just send in their yellow sheet online, make it a misdemeanor if they, don't do it. And if that gun gets used in a crime, make it a felony. Then it's enforceable. Just a thought. I mean, it's a conversation to have. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I've sold guns to people, and for rifles and shotguns, I've never, it's usually people I know or something. I don't like the gun anymore or whatever. But, I had an uncle of mine bought a handgun from me, and I made him go get a purchase permit just to cover my own self. I know he's not a criminal. I've known him since, he's known me since the day I was born.
But that's smart on your part, because if that gun ends up in somebody else's hands, it's used in a crime, then it's going to come back on you, potentially.
Yeah, I just, the government, especially under the current administration, they're so everything, man. I mean, if you go on social media, the anti-gun people are blaming everybody but the guy who pulled the trigger. And I'm sorry, the NRA or all the other lobbying groups, they didn't brainwash this guy and tell him to go do what he did.
Well, I mean, here's the point. Blaming the National Rifle Association for what happened at Umpqua Community College in Oregon is akin to blaming AAA for drunk drivers having accidents. I mean, seriously. The American Automobile Association is responsible for drunk driving accidents about as much as the NRA is responsible for felonies being committed with firearms. I mean, that's about as similar as it gets. Joe, I greatly appreciate your time.
All right.
There you have it. 888-900-9966. He made some great points there. He decided to cover his own tail by making sure he went, even selling it to a relative, making sure that he had the paperwork permit to purchase. And that's to cover himself. Mm-hmm. One of our listeners said, maybe we should just make it illegal for insane people to kill other people. Well, there's one law we could pass, sure. Might make a lot of sense. Is the doctor here? Let's see. Dr. Allan Saxe, professor of political science at the University of Texas, Arlington. He's perfectly good with guns as long as they're, not used for hunting. Anyhow, doctor, welcome to the program.
I'm getting in my Spider-Man costume right now.
Well, I wondered if you had your tights on.
I do.
Yeah, well, because, you're suspect right from the get-go.
Every morning.
Yeah, I've never seen you in person, but I still find you suspect. There's a little bit of crazy in your voice. Yeah, every day. So what do you think about all this? I mean, here's the thing. You've got Hillary Clinton out here saying she's going to use executive action, and all she's doing is pandering for votes. You've got Barack Obama saying, we should be like our friends in Australia and UK. You know what most people miss about that, in Australia and the UK, they confiscated all the private guns. Took them all away because really, Professor, other than that, what law could you pass that would prevent what happened in Newtown where, the kid's mom had guns available, or in Umpqua where the kid's mom had guns available? Again, maybe we should be looking at adult children that are living with mommy that have guns. Maybe that should be our first stop. Just a thought.
If they tried to confiscate guns in the United States, it would be an impossibility. I have no guns, but it would be an impossibility. But my father did. My father was
a sensible human being.
What I am.
Yeah, your father sounds like a sensible man.
He was. He was very responsible. I remember as a child growing up in Oklahoma, we had a wall of shotguns of different varieties, and my mother as well could fire a shotgun pretty well. I have nothing for a variety of reasons. But on the other hand, though, I still believe strongly, not only in the Second Amendment, but also in the right of people to have firearms, because I want people to defend me. I'm not a very strong person, as you may know. I'm not. I don't go out hunting for any kind of trouble, but I believe the world is a very dangerous place, and I want people to defend me. And that's why I'm a strong person for firearms. It'd be an impossibility to confiscate arms. You mean Hillary Clinton has actually talked about an executive action to confiscate firearms?
No, she says an executive action to enforce background checks and other common sense gun laws.
I see.
But no, it's Barack Obama when he's referring to Australia, when he's referring to other countries, the UK. These are countries that did confiscate firearms and took them away from all their citizens. So the private ownership of firearms was brought to a complete end. Anyhow, hold right there, Professor, because I want to talk about more of these issues as we move forward. Professor Allan Saxe here on the program, and not a gun owner, but understands the Constitution. 41 after the hour. Your thoughts welcome as well at 888-900-9966. We'll be right back.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
It's 6:45 after the hour. I want to pick up another comment here from Donald Trump. Donald Trump appearing on Meet the Press with Chucky Todd, an alleged reporter. He should be arrested for impersonating a political reporter, but he's all they've got at NBC. But apparently that's the best they can do. At any rate, Trump addressing mental health on Meet the Press yesterday. Here it is. Go.
Well, I think what should happen is we should take care of a lot of the sick people that we have walking the streets. You know, in New York, I can tell you, they opened up hospitals because of the fact that it was so bad, and they let people out. And we have people walking around all over the country. We have it. And they do that for budget reasons, but we have people that are very sick walking the streets all over the place. Now, with that being said, you look at these people and they're loners. You can almost predict what is going on with the person that did the shooting. Loner, being rejected by everybody, no friends.
Usually a young man in his early to mid-20s.
Yeah. Now, at the same time, you could say, and the neighborhood always says, oh, you know what, now that I see this happening, well, the truth is you can't put all these people, you know, if the neighbor says, well, I think he's not so well, what are you going to do, institutionalize him for the rest of his life? It's a very tough thing to do. The truth is, we've had things happening for hundreds of thousands of years, and you're going to have them happening for it's a very, very sad situation.
Now, one of the things that has come up in this conversation, and we're on the line still with Dr. Allan Saxe, professor of political science at the University of Texas, Arlington. One of the things that keeps coming up here, Professor, is this conversation about mental health and the conversation about how we address that. Now, if you go back to the 1950s, that's when the American Civil Liberties Union, which is interesting, the ones always coming out against guns, are the ones that came out against mental institutions in the 1950s, began suing the state of California, punishing the state of California for labeling people. And as a result, 90% of our mental health institutions have been dismantled. Thank you to the left for destroying the mental health system in America. But I agree with the idea of better mental health, and I agree with the idea that people that have mental health issues should not be able to get firearms. My concern, of course, is that they will lower the bar on what is considered to be any sort of mental health issue. You know, what? Have you ever taken an antidepressant? Bam, you're on the list. Have you ever taken anxiety medicine? Bam, you're on the list. Have you ever, anything, right? And you're not allowed to have a firearm. It'd be a de facto way towards gun banning by using the mental health system. What do you think?
I think part of the reason I'm going back to colleges and universities, which is where my life is, and that's where a lot of the problems have been, is that the universities today and the colleges admit everybody. And if you try to discriminate against anybody on the basis of their perhaps mental health, of course they can't find out, it would be an impossibility. They would file a lawsuit against the university in a minute probably if they wanted to. But I think part of the problem is that we open the gates and let everybody into colleges and universities these days for the most part. And that's not a good thing. Although by saying that, I remember at the University of Texas at Austin many years ago, there was a terrible shooting from their clock tower.
1966.
That's right. And that was a man by the name of Whitman, I believe.
It is.
And so that did happen, but that was such an anomaly. It was so strange because nothing like that ever happened years ago. I remember on college campuses and schools many years ago, there were no police cars, very little security. Today, especially in the elementary and public schools, I don't know what it is in Michigan, but here in Texas, in my city, there's a police car. In addition to the school security, there's a police car in just about every single public school. And the college
that's true, but see, the problem,
great security as well.
You look at, and that's another thing, special resource officers. Columbine High School is a good example, has a special resource, a couple, in fact, armed officers on campus now. You look at the state of Kentucky. Every school in Kentucky has an armed police officer on campus. Schools across Michigan in high-risk areas have armed police officers on campus. And why not? We have all of these returning veterans, men and women that need jobs. Why wouldn't we have a jobs program where we put, some of our finest, best trained people that are trained, in firearms and understand such things to go and be special resource officers at our schools, protect our kids from anything that might go on? Wouldn't that be the appropriate response, at least short term?
Well, but what has happened to our society, I'm showing my age, when I went to school, there was very little security, if any at all. I remember very little security at the university I attended. And today, there's security everywhere.
Well, that's because things have changed, and here's why. in America, we have devalued life itself. The sanctity of life means nothing to a lot of young people. Look at these people, 20-year-old shooters, 25-year-old shooters that have no regard for other human beings. They have no empathy, no sympathy, no remorse, no heart. And I think I could trace it back to 1965. I don't think Charles Whitman would necessarily fit that, but 1965, the destruction of the American family, Professor.
That may be true.
Over the course, there are no fathers in the home. I tell you what, when I was growing up around firearms, probably the same for you. Growing up around firearms, there was no playing with firearms. There was no action with a gun. You were taught respect the firearm, and if you didn't figure out how to respect the firearm, you figured out how to respect the back of your father's hand, and that was okay.
Isn't it ironical that in our foreign policy today, we seem to be very timid, very anti-military, anti-involvement, if you look at the numbers, and yet domestically, it's a terror. There's terror around every corner. So domestically, there's terror around every corner, but in foreign policy, many of the students and much of our population is very anti-military, anti-militaristic.
Same problem. You've had the same basic breakdown.
That's right.
America doesn't have a father figure running things, saying, wait a second, this is the way we're going to run things around here. And, Dwight Eisenhower hitting the desk and saying, this is the way it is, a leader of people. You don't have leaders anymore. You have timid people. And if you have timid families, you have kids that are not taught anything either. Oh, I can't spank Johnny. Oh, it's time for a timeout. Only a timeout. You know what? Sometimes you need a little bit more than a timeout.
At all our schools now, at some colleges and universities that I know about, some community colleges, they have success coaches, if you can imagine that. Mm-hmm. Success coaches.
And safe rooms in case somebody doesn't like the thought because they don't want to be threatened, because somebody might say something offensive.
That's
and
right.
it might. Anyhow, Professor, I got to run. Enough gobbledygook. All right, my friend, I got to run.
I'm in my Spider-Man costume, and I'm off into society.
Now, there he is in his tights, everybody. It's Professor Allan Saxe, political science professor at the University of Texas, Arlington. Back in a moment on the Steve Gruber Show.